Next, sir.
Yes, sir. The next guest for this session is Dr. Pandit, Milind Pandit, sir. He is professor and head, and he is a junior research fellow. He completed research on the works of Mahasweta Devi, post-colonial and subaltern aspects. His area of interest is linguistics, theory, literature, and social studies. Right now working at MSS Arts, Science and Commerce College, Ambad, district Jalna, and has 17 years of experience. Also working as a recognized research supervisor. Is a resource person in went to many places, central and state universities, for delivering lectures on the academic and social grounds. He has published 2 books and published over 10 research article papers in the standard, reputed and peer-reviewed international and national journals. He is a member of Board of Studies in English, also a creative writer, has poetry, short stories in English. He is a translator of literary works as well. He has published 3 poems in English. So many things are there to say about Dr. Milind Pandit, sir. So without taking much of time, now I will hand over this to Dr. Milind Pandit, sir. Sir, it's over to you. Milind Pandit, sir, please.
So before Milind Pandit begins, let me add one thing, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, please.
Milind Pandit was very instrumental in this organizing the seminar, and he has given almost all sub-themes to this seminar. So it's my pleasure to welcome him and to just request him to deliver the speech.
Yes, please, Milind Pandit, sir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zado. And what can I say about Dr. Uttam Ambore, Professor and Head, Department of English, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, Marathwada University, Aurangabad. Actually, I feel humbled by the usual encouragement and support I earn from him. So he is always like that. Well, first of all, it is my duty to place on record my heartfelt thanks to Professor Ambore, Head, Department of English of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, Marathwada University, Chair of BOS in English. He is a creative artist, a very well-known and pungent poet sometimes, and then he is also a critic of high order. Then it is also necessary for me to, instead of necessary but natural, to put my sincere thanks to Professor Sunil Pawar, Principal of Mohekar College, Dr. K.D. Jadhav, for this rare opportunity. And of course, Dr. Mustajib Khan, Anand Ubare, Dr. Anand Ubare, Dr. Mehernisa Pathan, Dr. Sudhir Nikam, who has recently presented his views on language and philosophy. And yes, one person that I have been consistently watching, being part of the webinars and web conferences across Maharashtra, or India for that matter, has been Dr. Parin Somani from London. So it is a great pleasure to have you, madam, here. Well, sir, I would like to share my screen. I think the permission is already there. I hope the screen is visible, sir.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So today, I would like to discuss the topic that is English language, the professional perspective. In fact, the keynote address was so mesmerizing that it held my attention completely, because it was all about, say, functions of language. And as far as that keynote was concerned, I could find out certain new ideas out of that. And yes, another paper by another presentation by Dr. Sudhir Nikam, a close friend of mine, has also, in fact, included certain aspects of presentation that actually have eased my burden of elaborating upon. But then here I would like to go by this topic and yes, discussing this topic within a short span of time, I'm not used to. Uh, in fact, is a bit of challenge for me, but I would definitely do my best to wind up within the stipulated time. I can understand the kind of suffering that the organizers have to ultimately shoulder. Well, as far as English language is concerned, I would like to slightly throw some light upon the background of introduction of English into India. We do understand, actually, this is just a kind of revision, but still I would like to begin with that so that I could take my views ahead in the determined way. East India Company introduced it by way of the first charter. It was during 1600. And later on, this language became a language of public instruction in 1830. And afterwards, it replaced Persian as the official language in 1835. My basic focus is upon the Minute of Thomas Babington Macaulay, that actually has been the cause of great debates and discussions and arguments and of course vociferous sessions all across the academia of India. And I have something to say. I'm something ambivalent to say about this minute. I have chosen a quote from, his minute, which appears in Bill Ashcroft's text. We must at present do our best to form a class who may be interpreters between us and the millions whom we govern, a class of persons, Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect. To that class, we may leave it to refine the vernacular dialects of the country, to enrich those dialects with terms of science borrowed from the Western nomenclature, and to render them by degrees fit vehicles for conveying knowledge to the great mass of the population. Here, I have to point out two things. One is, yes, Thomas Macaulay has always been criticized in a context, and that, of course, happens to be a right criticism. There's nothing wrong with it. But the other side of, say, Macaulay's criticism and Macaulay's ideas has been that he has also taken care of development of the vernaculars in his code. That is what, and he also had got focused his attention upon development of the dying languages like Pali, Sanskrit, Prakrit, etc. It is said. Well, apart from this, when we start answering, say, Macaulay that way, one thing is generally found missing in that response, and it is the people simply go on criticizing him. And as far as the appropriate or the fitting answer to his ideology is concerned, I think we can put it to him with the help of a rich legacy of education that took place in India. And it is of course with reference to Nalanda and Takshashila, because those were the universities where when functioning on an outstanding level or excellent level for that matter, Macaulay's culture was not into development at all. So I think that is the way we can answer. But whatever, Macaulay has been responsible basically in introducing English into our country. The second quote I have derived is from the Constitution of India. The clause of the clause number 343, the subclause of it, this article actually tells this: notwithstanding anything in clause 1, for a period of 15 years from the commencement of this constitution, the English language shall continue to be used for all the official purposes of the Union for which it was being used immediately before such commencement. So here I would like to tell that the Constitution of India had given the official associate language status to the English language. And we understand well that despite the fact that it is more than 15 years since its inception, that English language could not be, for example, driven out from this country, which exactly means that we have to anyhow cope with it. That is a simple equation here. And I would like to now move further with this profession. As far as professional perspective is concerned, I would like to say that this aspect is not much seriously taken into consideration in most of the places I can say, or I can have liberty to say for that matter. As far as the profession is concerned, as the Honorable Vice Chancellor, right in his introductory remark had said, inaugural remark said that we are incomplete without language. So profession is going to be incomplete without language. That is what I would like to emphasize. Before moving ahead, what the professional perspective can be, from, while applying English to our context, I would like to say that it is slightly important for us to have a glance at the status of English in India. For example, it is the official language in Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya, Nagaland, and Chandigarh. And it is an official language in the states like Andhra Pradesh, Haryana, Karnataka, Kerala, Manipur, then Sikkim, and Tamil Nadu. So here, the status of English as official language could be clearly seen. And it is also the language of parliamentary proceedings and law, judiciary, legislature, and administration, interstate communication, science, engineering, technology, medical science, etc. Why did I mention this? The answer is simple. If these are the fields occupied by English as a dominant language, then it is important that English be introduced in a professional manner to the students. And we also have an issue before us, and it is that of which English are we supposed to choose? British, American, Australasian, Indian, or African? And Professor Ambore is witness to that. When I had introduced a paper on Indian English, that paper had caused great provocation in that hall. It was an international level conference. And Halliday's co-author was present over there. So I have my own argument that Indian English is not concretely that much present. I do not mean that Indian English is not present with us, but it is not that concretely present as could be found in the case of, say, other types of English or other Englishes like British, American, Australasian, African, etc. But whatever, the point is that we have to choose one specific kind. Then again, it is a matter of individual choice. One can go for a hybridized version of English, no doubt about that. But then there are certain contexts that matter. And when it comes to the Indian context, we have, say, for example, the nomenclatures like English, Benglish, Manglish, Tenglish, Tanglish, Kanglish, etc., which exactly indicates that when you communicate in English in a state like, say, UP or Delhi, you find that you're speaking a mixed version of Hindi and English. In Bengal, it is the same. We have, I'm sorry, the similar case in, say, Malayalam context, Telugu context, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, etc. There's a textbook written by Jyoti Sanyal, the title of which is English. In that text, he has elaborated upon these concepts, and he has also given certain way to overcome the problems of English in India. Then when it comes to career abroad, because profession, I mean career here, and I'm speaking especially from the perspective of the students and their career. So when it means career abroad or profession abroad, for example, for the sake of study, work, or immigration, etc., then these are the tests that one is bound to clear. For example, we have TOEFL, which happens to be possibly the oldest test, while anyone going abroad has to clear. The other is IELTS. Then we have TOEIC, and then we have PTEA and OPI. When one desires to be a professional abroad, I think these tests are to be cleared. See, there are multiple views, there's a multitude of views, and it depends upon how one takes it. Of course, everyone has the individual right in a democratic country to whatever way to use language. And yes, that is, of course, the individual choice. But when it comes to certain context, language is mostly a matter of context. When it comes to the context, these things definitely matter there. And then here, I have to share something about certain professions at home. And these professions are, for example, education, the field of education. We have the IAS, IPS, IFS, IRS, judiciary, journalism, entrepreneurship. Then we have banking and finance, sports, interpreting, translation, writing, etc. Now, when it comes to the students of literature, we have education, interpreting, translation, and writing as the, the, the most possibly the closest areas to their heart. But apart from that, if they desire to go to other areas of career, yes, of course, we can have language functioning as a key factor there. Mostly we find that there are the people who believe that language is not as necessary as knowledge happens to be. Recently, we have listened to, say, a paper upon language and philosophy. Then, as I said to you, it is a matter of individual point of view. Language reflects one's personality that is widely acknowledged. And without language, there is no subject we can have a comfortable access to. And that is why language becomes important in our life. Now, to access these areas of career, because there's also some kind of contradiction amongst the Indians. When, for example, there are the cases of communication in a standard atmosphere, we find the kind of hybridity of English, or maybe the English language spoken under the influence of mother tongue, etc., has been mocked, and that candidate somehow seems to be crestfallen. These are the issues. That means there are two types of class. One is that of the elites that communicate in English. When we go to the cities like Mumbai, I mean metropolises like Mumbai, we find that the people there communicating in English, especially the ones belonging to the elite class, always mock the language that is English spoken by those that possibly happen to be from the outer areas or outer parts of that city. And these are the context, and also the context of career where proper awareness of English language in particular, because I'm speaking about that, matters. Now, how to gain proficiency level? Then these are the abilities that we can utilize for the sake of developing a proficiency levels. For example, ability number one, persuasive argument. We always find that the people argue, but is there persuasion? Can we be able to convince our audience? So this ability falls within the category of proficiency. Second thing is analysis, comparison, and contrast. Can we have the ability to analyze the things? Can we have the ability to compare the things? And of course, contrasting them. This is what actually the students, I mean, the learners, aspirants for being something in their life have to be aware of. Then we have alternative points of view and evaluation. Evaluative ability. with the help of language matters a lot, because evaluative ability is always preferred in certain professions. And we have debate, discussion, and hypothesis. When we open any of the channels in India, we find that no debate has the proper professional ethics. For example, the newscaster or the news editor, or say the news anchor, etc., has at least a dozen of people on his or her screen, and time is maybe 50 to 60 minutes, and advertisements are there as well. And one issue is, or one argument is opened, all the 10 people instantly start speaking. And it is really so tough to realize as to who is speaking what. And it is all about the farce. So this farce has been going on and on for years together on our news channels, I'm afraid. So debate has its own standards. When we refer to certain standard news channels of the world, we find that there are at the most two people invited to the panel, and the debate goes on in between the two. And the language happens to be so civilized. Unfortunately, this does not happen with most of the channels in our country, I'm sorry to say. Then we have the way of discussion, and yes, hypothetical ability also matters, that adds to proficiency. Unless proficiency is there, profession is not going to be properly built up. Then we have creative approach with imaginative disposition. The Department of English of our university, that is Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Marathwada University, has a special paper upon creative writing. I have gone through that paper, and yes, it contains a lot many ideas that actually inspire the students, the learners, to be creative more and more. So we here I remember the statement of Einstein, who used to say, imagination is more important than knowledge. So that is how imagination and creative ability uh, work together. Then we have logic. Recently, we have listened to the discussion about logic. Logic, justification, and explanation. What we speak about should be justifiable successfully, is what the demand of proficiency has been. And yes, explanation, the ability to explain the things, is also equally important. If these are the attributes developed by a learner, naturally, that learner can have access to any of the professions that have been considered of high esteem. Then I would like to move upon the other point, which in fact moves ahead, and it is communicative English, a professional perspective. I always get surprised to see that there are the titles in almost every city, the titles being spoken English class, etc. And whenever we visit these classes, we find that inside these spoken classes, grammar has been taught. I do not understand exactly what role grammar performs in that class. I mean, focus upon writing has been laid there. And I do not understand, when the title is spoken English, then what is the role left for teaching grammar and the things that come in the writing. But whatever, recently I would like to also narrate an experience of two Bangladeshi linguistic scholars. Of course, seasoned academics they happen to be, the stalwarts, let me call them. And they practically studied the environment of English learning in their country, and they introduced the cases to us at a recent conference held by Mr. Gangarde from Bhagwan. In that, they said that the problem with their teachers has been that they are not well aware of language. They are not well aware of English. And then they kept on speaking about the areas of phonetics, grammar, etc. And they said that it is the must at present that the trainers be trained properly upon language. We have certain institutes like Tata Institute of Social Sciences, or we have Infosys. There may be certain other agencies that actually practice train the trainer programs, or say training of the trainer or faculty development programs. And they actually laid most of their focus upon development of linguistic skills. And they believe that communication has to be developed first so that they can be, say, cutting across the other areas of, say, discussion and, say, career for that matter. And when it comes to suprasegmental or prosodic features of language, again, you have certain views or say certain arguments, and the people do not agree to this, we find. But again, it's a matter of individual choices. We have stress, accent, syllable, tone, or intonation. And the people say we need not take it seriously at all. I mean, the common argument that I have usually heard is like this: pronunciation is not necessary. The meaning is more important. Following the pronunciation rules is like slavering at the British. We should neutralize it. We should neutralize it. This is a welcome argument, of course. But when we think of being slaves to the British still, I never get convinced on this. The reason is quite simple. If the language is provided by them, then how can it be, like being free from the impact of their language? And that is the issue I do not understand. So I would like to say rather we should have the stance taken by, say, N. Ngugi wa Thiong'o and applied everywhere. That is decolonization of mind and abolition of the Department of English, etc. By then, it is possible for us to say that we are going to do away with the, say, British, everything that is British, let me put it otherwise. Anyway, when it comes to pronunciation, I have I have picked certain examples, some of them being from a text, and most of, the rest of them chosen by myself, prepared by myself. Let me tell you frankly. For example, we have wishing between the people. A says, wish you a happy new year. Suppose the respondent wants to say, same here. And just remember, or just imagine, instead of sir, it is pronounced as sure. What would happen? And then the respondent would sound more offensive. The respondent would sound, say, more like insulting someone else. So this happens. I do not mean that we should go for each and every kind of exactitude when it comes to pronunciation, but at least the basic levels of pronunciation should be clear to us. That is what I mean to say. Second example is he lying? And the answer is, or the response is, he is lying. I'm sure. But suppose this sure, because the people always have the problem to differentiate between sure and sir. But for instance, someone pronounces it as sure, which is here. I have taken the transcription. At that time, you just imagine what kind of interpretation there might be. And then we have example number 3, a pair. In fact, I have a pain in my stomach. I mean, maintaining length between the vowel sounds happens to be a bit of challenge to us Indians. But anyhow, if we miss on it, there's a possibility of certain linguistic accidents. And these accidents are nothing else than the misinterpretation of that communication, or maybe mistaking that communication. That is what I would like to say. For example, the respondent says, pain in stomach. There's no diphthong applied there. Just imagine what would happen. And then we have the last example, or the last pair of examples. She feels water. And the respondent would say, does she feel water? I mean, see the difference. When the length is missed out here, there can be miscommunication. And we are the people living under the conditions of miscommunication at present, let me say, that could be otherwise interpreted. But then apart from this, there are also the issues of aspiration or allophones for that matter. Inflections. I mean, inflections also pose great problems for us. As we are running short on time, I cannot expand these issues. Otherwise, they are very much interesting to discuss. Then we have paralanguage, and transcription is also the issue that remains to be improved upon. So this is always required. And then I would like to move upon to writing skill. I mean, about spoken skill, I have already spoken. Now I would like to get shifted to this, and it is the writing skill. Writing skill mostly we find suffers from these nuances. Say syntax and semantics are the two different branches of linguistics nowadays we find having become individual. When we were the students of post-graduation class, they were together bound into one text on linguistics. But here we find now there is a categorical difference between the two, and specialized areas of specialization each they have become nowadays. For example, we have a statement like the sun rises in the west, and the other is the sun sets in the west. East, for example, not west, but east. The sun rises in the west, the sun sets in the east. There's nothing wrong as far as syntax of this sentence is concerned. What is wrong with it is but semantics. So the traditional semantics is missing here. Interpretation, proper interpretation is missing here. And if we keep this out of sight, I mean, this is just an example. No one in the world would be producing, say, nonsensical sentences of this sort. But they can be the other category of sentences sharing similar kind of problems and complexities. And that is why I have just put in this example. And when we take these two examples, which are semantically wrong, they are structurally correct. But then, of course, the people wishing to master the area of communication have to look after this, that there's a proper combination of syntax and semantics. Then we have Concord. Actually, this is a very interesting area, but as time is running out, I cannot expand it, I cannot explore it further. But I would just like to say that there are at least 4 types of concords. One is grammatical, the other notional, the third is proximate, and the fourth is that of gender group. There are also other subtypes, but these are the major types of concord. David Crystal, in his Rediscover Grammar with David Crystal, has explained these concepts so facilitatingly that we simply get them understood at the first glance, I would like to say. For example, we have the case of gender or group nouns. If somebody is desirous to swim, they are allowed to. And here we find that on the one hand, there is somebody, and on the other, we have a pronoun called they. I mean, this is the trend of the language of the time, because it has resulted from, say, the feminist movement, of course, that always objected to the case of language, how the language has been used. And language is always, for example, male dominated, we find. And they wish to challenge this tradition of presenting language. And that is why we find that an epicene pronoun like they has been used instead for a singular pronoun like somebody. So this is again what we have to take into consideration. And this is mostly preferred nowadays in communication. And then we have, the committee have invited Jane. The committee used to be taken as a singular noun, but nowadays it has been treated as a group noun. So these are the aspects actually the people aspiring for a higher level of career should be aware of. And then we have collocations. That is again a major problem. Collocations are not properly incorporated in communication. Now, when it comes to a statement like make some strong coffee. Strong and powerful happen to be almost be equivalents to each other, but the contexts have to be different. Make some strong coffee makes a universal sense, whereas make some powerful coffee does not. I mean, that is the problem. And collocations, are very funny thing, are a very funny thing to master in communication. We also have another statement like award a prize or award a bribe to someone, for example. There's a text by MP, not MP, but someone called Sinha and Mihlani. So these two people authored a text, and the title of it is Indian and British English, in which there's a special discussion upon this word, that is award. And there's a statement like the police were awarded bribes by the thieves, etc. So here again, the connotation changes. Then ethics of language also come into question. And that is what actually the collocations do. If used properly, the language can have its own smooth flow ahead. Otherwise, there can be problems. Then I would like to discuss the rest of the two things and stop here. For example, we have the diction, area of diction. As we do understand, Aristotle in his Poetics has mostly emphasized upon this, because diction is something that forms the thought, and thought the character. I mean, while speaking about construction of a tragedy, he has emphasized this fact, that is that of diction. Diction brings out connotations, and Dr. Nikam has recently spoken of connotation and denotation. Connotation has to be, for example, accounted for by us. Proper words in proper places. For example, we have the words like incessant. Incessant is a word that has been continuously used in a wrong context, we find. Like actually, it has a negative interpretation, but that is always used to make something positive. And that is what actually we incessant efforts. I mean, when we refer incessant to, or when we combine incessant with efforts, the efforts do not carry that much value. This happens because we are putting a wrong word in, a right place maybe, and then we have the case of in front of. There are many people around us, we find, who have been using this phrase, I mean prepositional phrase, that is in front of, wrongly, just wrongly. Then again, it is a matter of choice, individual choice, I would like to say. Hardly is also a word. Then we also have, say, few, little, etc. Now, few and little cannot go without the use of article at all. But the people keep on using them without article. Zero article has been applied there, and that ultimately does not make the sense the writer or speaker exactly wants it to. Then one more word I would like to slightly stay on is cold-blooded. I mean, when I was working in Mumbai, Kirti College it was, for some time, at that time, there was a colleague of ours who was somehow quiet in his nature. And another colleague of us used to call him as cold-blooded. And whenever we sat together, he said, I love this man because he's cold-blooded. By cold-blooded, he wanted to say that he's quiet, he's patient, he's calm, etc. But actually, cold-blooded is the word that gives a very humiliating and, negative meaning to someone's personality. This is what actually happens. And then we also have a word like economical. Economical is a word that generally finds its own use in negative contexts, or sometimes if we have to use it in a positive context, then it has its own use. For example, let us not be economical with truth. This is how a positive context can be there. And then we can also say that, well, such and such person is economical in his views, etc. That means we cannot have a frank communication with that person. And another problem that has been consistent with most of the Indians has been the use of stative verbs. An ing participle has always been added to them. and that poses the problems. Randolph Quirk and Sidney Greenbaum have devoted a special chapter on this, say, or to this, for example, stative verbs. And they have collected a fair number of verbs that go under the category of stative verbs. And when an ing participle is added to a stative verb, then that again changes the interpretation. For example, there are the words like know, think, believe. There are also certain other verbs like, say, see, and there are so many other words, so many other verbs that have been stated, but they have been consistently used with an ing participle. Whether to use them or not can be choice of one's own. Apart from that, when it comes to, say, the context of a standardized form of English communication, this is not entertained there. Even if the people become economical in telling the reasons behind not accepting that candidate or not, say, selecting that candidate, they would not be, for example, happy with the use of this. That is what I would like to say. And there are also other gray areas, applications. I mean, you are all well aware of this area. The applications are not properly drafted by the candidates. And there are a lot of mistakes, a lot of errors. Errors we can understand, but the mistakes are always there. And even the errors are not expected to be there in that application. So writing an application has become an issue of concern. I mean, there are the youngsters who believe that they can write the way they like, but actually that mars the interest of linguistic interjection in them. This is what I would like to say. Letter writing is again another thing. When we go to, say, certain platforms like social media, etc., we find that people do not care much about language. Yes, we should be expressing spontaneously wherever we go. No doubt about that, that is welcome. But then again, if we attach some respect to language, that becomes important for us. Then we have email, and sometimes we find that there are certain issues like being equivocal, and the meaning is not properly taken there. The content writing is there, and preparing CV. I mean, this is interesting in India. The people prepare a CV and at the end give their statement. I mean, it is a kind of declaration. To the best of my knowledge and belief, the information supplied or furnished or provided in this CV has been, true to the best of my knowledge and belief. And then below that, there's a signature. I do not understand why such kind of declaration follows at the end of CV. Then we have paper writing, research paper. You are all the stalwarts and you are the people well versed in the area of research, and you do understand what kind of troubles you might have been facing. And writing a paper project or dissertation, for example, when it comes to dissertation, I mean, it is really really a very tough task. And then the area of punctuation, that is also so serious. When I talk to my students and ask them a question as to how many punctuation marks are there, my students, whether at the undergraduate level or at the postgraduate, they are not able to tell the maximum number. I wouldn't say exact. And when I tell them that it is between 35 and 40, 40 punctuation marks, they simply look at me, they simply gawk at me in such a fashion as if I have told them something that is seriously wrong. So that is again an area they are not able to find appropriate, say, way to apply punctuation in their writing. And the last thing that I would like to slightly spend some few seconds on is the area of MTI, mother tongue influence. See, when it comes to the context of a state, if the tone of communication goes in mother tongue, no problem, that is welcome. But there are certain issues associated with the influence of mother tongue. For example, we have, say, a statement like I trust on her, or maybe I love on my mother, or say, there are so many things that come out in the communication. And as far as this mother tongue influence is concerned, that in fact deprives our candidates of the better opportunities of career. I have had an experience from, say, the city of Pune. I shall just share it and then conclude. There was a candidate who was rejected just because he had MTI. He carried MTI some 7 or 8 odd years ago. At that time, he was there in Pune. He was about to lose 20,000 a month because of the loss of that job. And he visited certain, say, experts in language, and they could not find satisfactory answer to his problem. And someone suggested to him my name. He came to me, and initially he thought that he cannot have a solution from me, but I did my best. And finally, when I told him that yes, fluency was there, everything was there, but then uh, so far as the MTI was concerned, that was the correct observation of that committee. When it comes to, say, pronouncing certain words under MTI, writing certain sentences under MTI, naturally the people belonging to that kind of context of career object to that. So yes, there are a lot many things that I can keep on speaking, but as I have already transgressed the limit of time, I beg the organizers pardon for that, but then I feel that I should stop here. And yes, I'm really very much grateful to Professor Uttam Ambure, as I said right in the beginning, who has been so supportive, so kind and generous towards uplifting interests of his juniors. So my special thanks to you, sir. Again, my special thanks go to uh, Professor Sunil Pawar, the principal of Mahekar College, and Dr. K.D. Jadhav, our beloved friend and member on Board of Studies, who have opened this likelihood to me to be in touch with such a gathering that has been highly studious. Again, before leaving, I would like to say I am equally grateful to each member from amongst the audience for having given me a patient